Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about the classical world, classical education, put on by some guys who work at a classical school in Austin, Texas. My name is Graham Donaldson, and I am here with AJ Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Thomas Magby.
Hey.
And gentlemen, as I take stock of my life, I ask myself a question. Do Thomas and AJ still spark joy in my heart?
I don't like.
And I've determined that no.
Oh, no.
You will be sacrificed to the volcano gods. No, I'm just kidding.
We just got kicked off the podcast.
As long as he brings rain. Yes. That's all I care about.
Yeah. Apparently, we're talking about Marie Kondo today. This is the rumor that I've heard, that we are going to be talking about organizing our lives and whether or not...
Like modern classics, right?
Modern classics.
Yeah. Have you all read this book before?
Nope.
Okay. So the life-changing magic of tidying up.
Are we seriously?
I have the cover pulled up in front of me. What do you?
Wow.
Wait, I don't understand.
Man alive, we're such a trendy podcast. Although we're like 4 months behind.
No, years behind. This book came out a long time ago. Okay, so you all have.
Is it classical yet? Is it like
it's been
over
out for more
100
than
years?
6 months?
Oh,
no,
okay.
more than 6 months makes it a classic, right? I'm pretty sure. Okay, I'm sure you've heard of this before. What is
today's 24-hour news cycle?
Yeah.
Am I right?
6 months is
classic.
Is ancient.
Yeah.
Do you all know anything about this book?
It is an adorable Japanese woman who goes to people's houses and organizes them meticulously.
There's a Netflix show.
Yeah, I watched one episode and it stressed me out.
I think the first episode.
Yeah.
Why did it stress you out?
Because there was like hoarders.
Yeah, yes. So it stressed you out how much stuff the people had. Yeah. But don't they get rid of a bunch of stuff?
They do.
Okay.
But it was also just like made me think about how much stuff are in how many people's houses and then all this stuff. And I just got like, I felt the world choking. It was more of a like consumerism stress out. But anyway.
That's fair. I think there's now like a comic book version of this. So they adapted into that. So it's been kind of a big deal. #1 New York Times bestseller. So it's a big deal book. Okay.
So much so that she has become a verb. To Marie Kondo means...
KonMari is the...
I know she got her own verb, but people call it Kondoing, which is also really kind of stupid because she invented her own word to talk about this. KonMari. So anyway, whatever.
That's weird. So, Graham, you just kind of made a joke about this, but if you were to summarize like the message of this book, I guess you haven't read it, but you have the core idea of it. What is this book about?
Take stock of all the things that you have and put it through this simple test. And the simple test is I don't think all that simple. Does it spark like joy? Does it give you some sort of emotional reaction of I want this? And if it does, you keep it, and if you don't, you ruthlessly execute it from your life.
Sure. So she kind of early on in the book, she says that the purpose of the process is that we should be choosing what we want to keep, not what we want to get rid of, which is an interesting question to start with.
Yes.
And then you just described this. The process is to take each item in one's hand and ask, does this spark joy? If it does, keep it. If not, dispose of it. What do y'all think about this as a process?
Fine. Yeah, I mean, sounds good.
Okay.
I mean,
what about tools?
Yeah, so I guess people have trouble discarding things that they could still use, which have a functional value, that contain helpful information, informational value, and that have sentimental ties, emotional value. When these things are hard to obtain or replace, rarity, they become even harder to part with. So tools are kind of that funny category of, do you actually need them? Like, how often do you use those tools? Oh.
Well, for example, the laptop I'm using right now, I use for DJing and for podcast. I'm not flowing with joy every time I look at this laptop. But if I ditch this, a lot of the things that do bring me joy would be gone.
Interesting. Well, then the laptop would do that then. Or maybe you should get a better laptop. Right.
I have a laptop that's nicer, but it's harder to transport, I guess.
Yeah. So that's the point. The point is like finding things that you really like and then like sticking around and holding on to those.
Is the point like to try to apply that rubric at the front end so you don't accumulate?
Eventually.
Or can you only learn if something brings you joy by having it for a while? And so accumulate stuff, but then you have no idea if this is going to fit your criteria. So live with it for a year and then you can go through the process of getting rid of it.
No, I mean, so most people come to this having a bunch of junk. That's why they're reading a book about throwing things away. And so the goal is to figure out what you want to keep and then to like have that in mind when you're making purchases later. So she'll talk about like holding off on purchase. It's basic advice you've heard before, but don't buy anything. Wait 24 hours, wait a week before making any major purchase. Thinking about whether you actually want to hold on to this thing. So the process is kind of where we're ending up with this. So there are all these different categories you're supposed to go through to find out what you want to throw away. So you start with clothes, you move on to books, you move on to papers, you move on to miscellany, and then you move on to sentimental items at the very end. And the idea is to start with things that are easier to throw away and move to things that are harder to throw away. So here's the basic line of what stuck out to me in reading through this book. This is a long time ago. Graham has talked before about how eventually we're moving out to a bunch of land out in south of Austin, west of Austin, wherever that is. And so part of what we needed to do was clear through our stuff, and we needed a way to systematically do that. So we found the book helpful. But here's a line, and this is why we're talking about this book. So again, that second step is first get rid of clothes. Second step is to get rid of books. Okay, so she talks about this process of how she picked which books to get rid of. So realizing that what I really wanted to keep was not the book, but certain information or specific words it contained, I decided that if I kept only what was necessary, I should be able to part with the rest. My idea was to copy the sentences that inspired me into a notebook. Over time, I thought, this would become a personal collection of my favorite words of wisdom. It might be fun to read it over in the future and trace the path my interest had led me. With great excitement, I pulled out a notebook I liked and launched my project.
Oh, Marie.
I began by underlining the places I wanted to copy. Then I wrote the title in my notebook and began transcribing. Once I started, however, I realized that this process was far too much work. It takes time to transcribe. And if I was going to be able to read those words in the future, my handwriting had to be neat. To copy 10 quotations from a single book would take at least half an hour, and that was a low estimate. The thought of doing this for 40 books made me dizzy. She talks about trying to use a copy machine and then how that didn't work. And then ultimately she realizes that she never actually goes back and reads these quotes. So
she abandons her project altogether.
And then only keeps, I forget if she specifies this, but basically keeps one book at a time. Because she's only ever reading one book at a time. Well, gentlemen, I mean, you don't need the other books. You're not going to go and read them, right? Wait, is this not how you use books?
No.
Wait, what do you mean?
I guess maybe...
The sounds of pain coming from you right now.
It hurts so much. I guess I'm an educator, so it's a little bit different, but I reference books constantly in class, and I'll pull them off and read quotes and include quotes and, tests and stuff I want to do in class. And
yeah, but if Marie Kondo's not she's I was going to say she's not an educator. I mean that she does not teach formally in a classroom. She does train people on how to be organized, but maybe she doesn't need
How long has it been since you read Lord of the Flies?
Gosh, 10 years at least.
What do you remember from that book?
I remember a glass ball shattering and the guy who dies.
Piggy.
And is that a spoiler? Sorry.
Piggy.
Oh yeah. I remember my feeling of dread at reading it. Yeah. I couldn't name Piggy. I couldn't name characters.
They
no concrete
bludgeon
lessons.
Piggy to death, and then they're saved a chapter later.
That glass ball was actually a white conch shell.
Oh, there you go. See?
And not a glass ball.
See?
So
even my details are gone. Interesting.
Yeah, even the details are gone, and that means that if you had these great lessons, that's what's the problem.
The descent into madness of this anarchic society, all that stuff. Yeah.
That's the problem with human memory is I can read a book and feel like I've gleaned the lessons from it, but those lessons will. So I kind of think it like being baked in, right? So it'll get baked into me, but over time, kind of like a tattoo, that tattoo will get blurry and the thing baked in will maybe lose meaning and I'll lose a little bit of the definition and perhaps over time the lesson will get overlaid with other lessons and other tattoos will cover it up and it's not fresh anymore. And that's just how human memory works. You're just going to forget. It becomes a glass ball instead of a white conch shell.
Yep.
And you have to be able to stave that off by rereading, which means going back to a book, but having marginalia so I can find things in the book quickly and being able to reference them, and Commonplace. My Commonplace book is a huge reference point for me.
I ascribe to Nassim Taleb's or Talib's, I don't know how to pronounce his name, his view of the library, where in the library you have lots of books that you haven't read. Like my library has tons of books that I've never read, and they sit there judging me. Yeah. They sit there looking at me, and every time that you see the library, there is the aspiration to read them, but then there's also that reminder that I do not have everything. I have not read everything. I do not have the capacity to read everything. Yep. And so then there's a bit of not only like a spurring on that a shelf full of books gives. Like I'm looking at AJ's shelf of books in his classroom right now. There are books in there that I'm like, oh, I've always wanted to read that. And cool. The fact that I haven't or don't reminds me of my capacities and should force me some sort of humility. And it also, in those moments where I'm looking for something to read, I have it and I pull down and I can begin. So I feel like there's that the Kondo method, or her eliminating these books for the sort of the inner peace that a clean space brings is not as good. It is a good thing, but it is not as good as having the shelf full of books that you want to read or have read and that you can go back and do reference to. Because,
Yeah, James Shaw talks about the uneasiness of walking into a house that has no books in it, that has no bookshelf in it. I think he's onto something.
What if you go to a party and there's no bookshelf? What do you guys do? I don't know what to do. I usually want to go and peek at their bookshelf. That's what I do at parties. I make friends with the cat and I look at their bookshelf. Sometimes I'll stand there reading a book in the party.
Just standing in the corner?
When you go to a party, you should befriend their pets so much. So
Why? What?
You should befriend them to the point where the pet wants you to be their master.
What?
That's just a game you can play if you're bored at a party.
Apparently we all hate going to parties if we because none of us have mentioned, I don't know, talking to people at this party.
Make that pet question their loyalties.
What is happening right now?
I need to know everything about my host's bent, and you can learn that from their bookshelf.
That's true.
So I can look at their bookshelf and then be like, oh, okay, well,
yeah.
We're not going to have any conversations.
We're going to leave the party early.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, we're not talking about the life-changing magic of tidying up. We're just what blows my mind is that like this passage is in a book that sold, I don't know I think over 2 million copies. Again, number one bestseller for months and months and months, if not years. Like a big deal, a big modern culture deal book includes this idea of like, keeping any of the knowledge of the things you read is essentially a waste of time. That you're better off, sure you can read for entertainment, but get rid of the book afterwards because you're never going to look at that stuff again. That's just a super bummer thing that we're going to launch off into of how do we actually hold on to that knowledge of what we read. So again, I'm misremembering details from books I've read before that I would state confidently, oh no, I know this, but I don't actually. So you all have referenced this already. One of the ways to do that is a thing that's called a commonplace book, but that's a weird name. So let's start there. What is this book? AJ, you just referenced it, and Graham, you've given talks on this before, but what is this thing you call a commonplace book?
You've given talks. You're the expert.
Yeah,
Have you given talks?
Yeah, you did Paideia 3 years ago.
So a commonplace book is a book that you write quotes in from other books, and you keep them and you compile them in that book because your memory is not going to retain these sorts of things. Right. And it's not just facts, but it's meaningful pieces from the book. And then it gives you a discipline to your reading. So you're not just reading and putting down and then never remembering. But for me, at least, whenever I keep a commonplace book and whenever I have to give a talk or if someone asks me something about a specific topic and I'm like, oh man, I remember having opinions on this 5 months ago when I was reading After Virtue or whatever. And After Virtue is I'm reading it right now. Yep. It is such a hard book, and the amount of focus it requires to go through this book is high, but there's such good stuff in there that I know that when I'm done, if I don't keep some sort of method of synthesizing what I've read into some sort of output, a commonplace book, where the conclusions that I have or the marginalia, if I can sort of reproduce it in some sort of way, I'm going to forget what I read of a very difficult book in a year from now. So it's kind of like there's so many different ways to do it. You just need to develop a method where you're basically taking the things that you read and turning them into some kind of artifact. And Thomas asked us to bring ours, so I've got mine sitting in front of me. Mine is a shoebox filled with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of index cards with quotes written on them, and I've categorized them in terms of different categories. And so not only does it force me to try to synthesize what I'm reading into good takeaways, it's more like when I flip through the cards, it sparks my memory, which I would not necessarily have unprompted. Sure. Because I can't keep everything. So I sort of think of it as like an external hard drive of my brain. Like I can't keep everything that I read about, like for example, in the last podcast, I gave a quote from Epictetus about sheep and wool, and I have the note card. I mean, you can hear it. I have the note card in my hand of that exact quote because I know the gist of it, but the way that he phrases it is better than I could remember it. And I haven't remembered it, so having it as a note card. And the thing is, maybe I'll forget it. And so every once in a while, so I have these note cards and I flip through them, every couple of months, and I'm like, oh yeah. And that may spark something that I'm reading now that I can bring into my teaching. So it's basically just like creating a system for yourself. At least that's how I've used the commonplace book.
How long does it take you? How long has it taken you to put together that shoebox?
Years. I mean, what I have done and I've stopped doing, in fact, full disclosure, I don't think I've added a new note in probably 10 months. So I've almost a whole calendar year without adding a new note. But what I used to do and what I was really disciplined at and what produced a lot of material was our church is on Sunday afternoons, and we get home around 6, and then we have dinner, and then we're kind of like getting ready for the school year or for the work week ahead. I will do Sunday nights. I will sit and I will go through the things that I have read, and I will write out. I will go and look at the things that I've underlined, and then I will write them on note cards, and then I will put them into some sort of category. Oh, I said I haven't been doing this in 10 months. That's not true. I have a bunch of things from Black Swan in here that I read.
But maybe there's a gap, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you did Black Swan, but maybe there were 6 months before.
Yeah. I think I read Black Swan like last Christmas.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then I create these note cards, and then I try to give them categories that they go under so that I can organize them. But Thomas was making fun of my categories earlier because I was looking for a note and I couldn't find it because my categories are not super helpful.
Right.
I don't really, but the thing is, I don't really know because I'm sort of like.
But they're your own categories. You don't need to.
I'm making it up as I go along.
Yeah. So we'll zoom out a little bit and
Sure.
we'll come back to this so we'll come to this later of what do your commonplace books look like? Will be one topic. And then after that, how do you then use them? But Graham's already said all of this, that commonplace is a weird word because I hear commonplace and I think like every day, right?
Yeah.
It's a commonplace occurrence. It's a thing that happens every day. But the word is referencing more the topics themselves, that there are general topics that are in, like, that's like literally what commonplace is referencing. There are these general topics that you are reading about, studying, and you are collecting information on those general topics.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of the book, you can use it for whatever you want to. I think of one of the purposes as to organize the information that you're receiving and show, here's what one author says about a thing, here's what another author says about that same topic, and you collect them in that way. Is that a fair? I think that is a thing that is typical of commonplace books. Okay.
And especially books that you enjoy, but don't necessarily immediately fit into the things that you're currently thinking about. So, for example, Thomas, you years ago lent me The Intellectual Life. Is that what it's called?
Early on. Yep.
And how long did I have it for?
Years.
I had it for like 2 years, and I read it in fits and spurts. But for whatever reason, the book just never like really grabbed hold of my like thought life.
Yeah.
But every time I read it, I came away with something interesting. And I do have a lot of notes from that book in my Commonplace book, but it didn't immediately fit into whatever I was reading or whatever I was thinking about right now.
Yep.
So it took a long time for me to read it. But I now have these notes, and I'm probably not going to read it again. And I now have these notes that maybe one day are going to be little keys that unlock something else, or they're going to fit into something, So I kind of see it as like it's a contingency plan for something that doesn't really make sense, right? Or that doesn't really fit into what you're thinking about right now.
Because I'm remembering when I read The Intellectual Life, and Graham can attest to it based on the underlining, I underlined almost every other sentence in the first third of the book.
Because you were devouring it for whatever reason.
Yeah, but then in the back 2/3, I felt like I was doing a disservice to the book by, if you highlight everything, you haven't really, filtered it at all. And so we just, what I mean? Like we just collected different things from that same book. And that's what, this kind of relates to our catechism discussion last time, that you're going to draw something different from a book than the same person reading that same book. That's fine. You should return to those books anyway.
Whereas it's funny that you guys talk about that book, like if you underline everything, I have a rule that I'm not allowed to include anything from Dorian Gray in my Commonplace book. Because it would really just be like the whole thing.
Right.
The writing is so good. There are so many turns of phrase.
Yeah.
It would take me hours and hours. And instead I just keep the book of Dorian Gray, and that's my commonplace for Dorian Gray.
And that's a great point. I'm focused, what I just said was I focus on the ideas. And so there's an interesting idea. I want to collect that and kind of group them together. AJ, I think you focus maybe more, for sure more than I do, on like the beauty of the language itself as a thing to collect also, correct?
It's certainly an element. I have a lot that are ideas, and then I have some that are simply there for a nice turn of phrase.
Yeah. Is that just a different category for you?
The way I categorize is different than the way Graham does.
Perfect.
Yeah, I've tried to adopt AJ's categorization of phrases of like just writing that I like. and I'm trying to collect. So if you go in my marginalia of any book that I read, if you see something that says in the margin WL, that means that I've underlined it with an I for adding it to something that I would show in my writing lab at school. Because here is just the way that the sentence was turned or the way that the phrase happened was a good example of good writing.
Yep.
And so I was reading this weekend, this just happened, I was reading... I'm reading Shelby Foote's History of the Civil War, and I just started the second volume. And there was this one paragraph where they were talking about a specific short Confederate general who wore like flouncy shirts and was quite sort of dandyish in his appearance. And it had this great phrase where he talked about that he always got what he wanted. And when he was young, he wanted a brick house, a seat in Congress, and the specific girl.
Okay.
And then it said that, and it talked about how, he couldn't get these things, and the girl was put into a convent. The dad didn't want his daughter to marry her, so she put her into a convent. Wow. And he said that he always got what he wanted, and for the brick house, he extended his credit. For the senatorial seat, he defeated all of his opponents, and he scaled the convent wall. And I was like, that's just hilarious. It was really funny. I don't know if he ever scaled the convent wall, but it was such a great example of like parallelism. I'm going to show it to my kids at some point.
Here's a fun one. This is on Dr. Hirsch's Bulbous Head. It's by Chesterton in his Father Brown series. The door was opened to them by the doctor's old servant, Simon, who might have passed for a doctor himself, having a strict suit of black, spectacles, gray hair, and a confidential manner. In fact, he was a more presentable man of science than his master, Dr. Hirsch, who was a forked radish of a fellow with just enough bulb of a head to make his body insignificant.
Awesome.
That's good.
I think it's just a fabulous, that is a fabulous sentence.
A fun little phrase.
Yeah. Well, let's do, so just to say it again. So commonplace literally just means they're general topics that you're kind of organizing these thoughts, these quotes around. Then the book part is also, I think, a loose interpretation of what a book is. So Graham has already said he uses a note card system. I also use a note card system, and AJ's, I believe, is a digital note card system.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So none of us are using an actual book.
I did for a long time.
Yeah. And if you were to Google commonplace book, most often what you see are actual books. Lewis Carroll has like a really cool one that pops up usually. So like Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, like that, he's writing in a journal, and then that's what's published eventually as Meditations. So usually you'll find books. Doesn't mean it has to be a book. And especially with the internet and PCs, like there are lots of really interesting electronic options. So that's kind of what a commonplace book is. So can we talk about what our commonplace books look like?
Sure.
AJ, do you want to start?
Yeah, I originally had a book, and what I found was that if I wanted to go back and find a particular quote, it took me forever. And it was painstakingly difficult to transcribe, just as the lady said, right? Yep. Writing by hand takes a long time.
It does.
So what I do is, as I read, if I find something I like, if I don't have my commonplace book handy, and I usually do, it's digital, but I will underline it or bracket it and put CPB next to it, commonplace book.
Yeah.
And then later, once I finish the book, I'll go back through and I'll transcribe all of my CPB spots, and I cross it out once I've done it. So if I'm rereading through a book and I find a CPB that hasn't been crossed out, I know that I still have to enter that at some point. So the way I enter it is I actually do mine on Evernote. So Evernote, if you're listening and you'd like to send me some free swag or something, I'm waiting. I would love
free
some
reference.
free swag.
Free, yeah.
But it's a fantastic little program.
That's
it's
classical
free
stuff at veritasacademy.net. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Digital swag, is that what we're asking for?
We accept Venmo.
There you go.
D-swag.
So it's a free program.
Do you have premium by any chance?
I don't.
You don't pay? Okay, there you go.
I don't pay for premium. You can have it on, I think it's like 3 devices anyway. So
right.
my phone and 2 laptops is more than enough. And even if you don't install the program, you can get it free online. Like they have a website.
There you do get benefits of how much you can upload if you pay for premium, which when I was heavily using Evernote was really helpful. But for most people,
and I'm not including any pictures or videos. And so if you're just doing text, you can upload an insane amount of quote stuff. So I enter the title of my quote, I enter my quote, and then I think one of the reasons I really love this is that I can divide these into notebooks. So every notebook is a different book or novel. And so all of my quotes from that book are in that notebook. So I can just scroll down all the authors I've read, find a book that I like, and see all the quotes from that book. And then the other thing is that every time I enter a note, I give it tags. So if it's on, I don't know, fear and pain and the modern man, I'll put fear, pain, modern man. And that way later, if I'm doing a talk or presenting something, then I can search my tags, and every quote that has to do with money or beer or whatever will.
I like those two categories.
I have beer tags. Like there's a couple
you have the
on
one from
brewing.
Great Expectations, right?
Yeah,
yeah, the brewer.
And so I can bring up all those things, and it saves me all the time of having to search all the way back through my gazillion quotes. It's a little bit of a bummer because I don't have a chronological record of my thinking and reading, but I do get a list of all the books that I've read, and then notes from all those books.
Because can't you sort your notes also by when you put them in?
Yes.
So you
definitely.
could,
so you actually can get
a
a note of that. Yeah. I can't recommend it more highly.
Provided that you do it in that way.
That's true.
Like that you're
putting them in
the order that you read them. But, you know.
So I've got it on my phone and my laptop, and I use it for school all the time. I mentioned it a few podcasts ago that when I open class, we have a quote response. Most of those are pulled directly from my Commonplace.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't thought about that. So then do you react, like, do you get to tell the kids then, like, this is my reaction. This is why I included it in my Commonplace.
Yeah, and that's cool. Some of them are fun and some of them are thoughtsy, and I get to tell them why I chose it.
Thoughtsy?
Thoughtsy, yeah. English teacher over here. Yeah, thoughtsy.
What's thoughtsy?
It's
exactly what it sounds like, man.
Seriously.
Welcome to English.
Oh no. Welcome to English. Could that be a t-shirt too? I like that.
It's really Englishy.
Yeah.
Englishish.
And something I hadn't thought of until you said that is, so for Graham and I use a paper system, and so I have a limited number of categories. Like I have to make a new section divider for each new category. You have infinite. You can just add a tag.
I can add tags as long as I want to.
Yeah. So that also sounds really good. And then just because Graham talked about this, do you have any system for, I'm sure your answer is going to be no, but do you have like a day when you put in all your quotes, or just like any kind of rhythm to how often you are adding to it?
If I just have some time, I'll pull out my books and go back through them. I actually have a sort of a backlog of 3 or 4 books I need to go back through.
That's where I am too.
I mean, I have a backlog of 10 months. I mean, like the thing is, it's like Marie Kondo is not wrong when she says that it is a daunting task, but at the end of it, it is a satisfying thing. Like it's
worth doing.
It's worth doing.
Do you want to talk more about your system, Graham?
So mine is just note card system, and I've got them on 4x6 note cards, and I put them into categories. And
can you read those categories?
Yeah,
just because they're wonderful.
I have one called the Inner Citadel, which is just a category that's dedicated to quotes that help sort of with some of those concepts that we talked about with Boethius and not letting the wheel of fortune like dictate your moods. So things that help you. So I'm trying to think of an example. So here's one that would be in the Lower Citadel. This is from The Intellectual Life by A.G. Surliange. A lover of pleasure is an enemy of his body and therefore quickly becomes an enemy of his soul. Right. So then this is. Spinoza, do not weep, do not wax indignant, understand. So I have Inner Citadel, so they're quotes that are kind of supposed to help one think about, that which you have the direct control over. I've got a category of just things from the Middle Ages. I have something that's called stories that illuminate. And what that is they are like examples of things that happen in the real world that I use as examples that you can draw lessons from. So, let's see. I'm trying to think of an example. Graham
just held up a card that has a coffee stain on it. Which is just
they
a
all
nice
got
touch.
coffee stains on them. Let's see if I can give an example of stories that illuminate. Here's one. Hannibal marched on Rome and rode around the city trying to be menacing. Meanwhile, the land his camp was on came up for auction. It was sold at normal price. Rome would not be intimidated. That's just a story. That's a true story that happened. So Hannibal was riding around Rome, but Rome had so much like fortitude and belief that they were going to win and beat Hannibal that the land that the enemy was, the invading enemy was camping on was sold at the regular normal price. That's just like, that's baller. That's awesome. I love that story.
That's good.
So I've got that. I've got one on just sort of investing. I've got a category on mental models, which is just sort of structures of mind that can help you make sense of the world. So I'm trying to think of, here's a mental model, again, from The Intellectual Life. Truth serves only its slaves.
Wow.
Love it. Another mental model. Here's an example. The Red Queen effect. So the Red Queen effect is taken from Alice in Wonderland.
Oh.
So in a competitive environment, no matter how well one adapts to the environment, they have to run to stay still as everyone else is competing too. For example, if you stand at tiptoes at a concert and then everybody else stands at tiptoes on a concert, everybody is now running to stand still. The only way you can see the stage is to stand on tiptoes, and everybody's exerting more effort and is all in the same spot. That's called the Red Queen effect. It's taken from everybody running to stay still in Alice in Wonderland.
Unless you're like me and you're just wicked tall.
Yeah, and then unless you're like ages and wicked tall. So then so that's mental models. I've got one called just metaphors. I just collect metaphors. One that is an unhelpful category that's just called the magnanimous man, which is kind of like just a catch-all. I've got one on just nature, on the economy, theology and faith, culture, which doesn't have very much in there, classical education, and then another one that's just called quotes, which is kind of just like I don't really know what to do with it. So I think this only works if you put the categories in pencil, which I don't do, which I need to start doing, and then allow your categories to change.
Sure.
But the best thing about having them in note cards is you can take a giant stack of them and then you can just sit with them. And then if you're working on a talk, you can now make a separate stack of all of these quotes that all sort of relate to each other. So to see how these things sort of interconnect, to me, has been incredibly helpful. And then I've got just a backlog of cards here that don't have a home yet.
Interesting.
And I don't know where they're going to go. And these are the ones that I just did, but I mean,
So
just
do you
did
leave them
6 months ago.
until you find out what you look for a commonality and then create a new topic?
Kind of. I'm kind of in a crisis of tagging right now, which I've just sort of described, which is I have these tags which I started, but I'm realizing that as the book grows, the tags are less helpful. So I feel like it would have been better if I had erasable tags and more flexible tags. Or I need to stop taking tags as seriously as I do.
But the tags are just dividers in your system.
Yeah,
correct?
exactly.
So
yeah.
they're easy to replace.
Yeah, they are.
Just buy new ones.
But I also write the little tag on the top of the note, so I know where it goes back when I'm done with it, which has created some problems. So if I could erase those tags, that probably would be a better.
Yeah, so I don't do that. So mine is very similar to Graham. It's a cardboard box that looks like a shoebox. They're 3x5 cards, and they also have paper dividers inside of that. I'm so early in doing a commonplace book that my topics are like just way bigger and more general. So instead of investing in economics being two different ones, I just have a big business category. Mine is still, it just feels like it's still growing at this point. And eventually we'll split out into smaller categories. Graham, you just mentioned that one benefit of commonplace is when you have to like speak, you have like background material that you've been collecting instead of having to do it all at once, which is awesome.
Or it's not just coming out of whatever I'm reading right now.
Totally.
Or getting sketchy quotes from the internet.
With no context, right?
Have you guys ever heard the C.S. Lewis quote? What is it? An education without values, as useful as it is, seems to make man a more clever devil.
Yeah. The clever devil part, yeah.
Yeah, that's not C.S. Lewis.
Really? Who's that?
I think there's a Duke Wadsworth, something like that.
Uh-huh.
The thing is it's quoted from The Abolition of Man. But
it's funny. And so they're quoting Lewis quoting this guy.
No.
Oh.
C.S. Lewis he never said this. It's not in his book. It's not in The Abolition of Man. In fact, he would argue that there is no such thing as an education without values. That's what The Abolition of Man is about.
So interesting.
You cannot get outside the Tao. That's all of chapter 2. So I don't know where this comes from. I seem to vaguely remember something about a clever devil in Lewis somewhere, but it's certainly not The Abolition of Man.
Interesting.
But that quote is everywhere online.
It's everywhere online.
I checked.
You checked Abolition of Man?
Yes. It's not there.
Now I'm curious. So I think that's helpful. So this is great advice. So when collecting quotes, so especially when an author is quoting someone else, what I've done is I cite the original author, but then also where I found it. So I know what book I found it in, so I can
The trouble with quotes online is context, right? Like so brevity is the soul of wit. That's a great sounding quote.
It's also
spoken by
ironic.
a complete bloviate in Hamlet. So that adds a layer of its interpretation to it. So I don't know. It's just
there's also another one. It's quotation is a useful substitute for wit, or the ability to quote is a substitute. But that's always attributed to Oscar Wilde. And again, Oscar Wilde didn't say that. Someone else said that, and the quotation is way different.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Just because you all brought this up, what do you include on that note card? So there's the quote itself. Do you include where it came from?
Yep. Who said it in the book that it was from?
Do you date the cards?
Not really.
Oh,
no,
okay.
I don't date them.
Okay.
Mine's automatically dated.
Yeah.
And For a title, if it depends where I type it. In one, if I type it, it'll automatically take the first line, which is perfectly passable for me.
Oh,
sometimes I title it.
Do you mean date by like when the book was written or when I wrote it?
When you wrote it.
Oh no, I don't do that.
Yeah. Do you put when the book was written?
Not really. Not particularly. No.
Okay.
If I'm quoting Friends, I'll put who said it.
And I was going to ask that too. So we've talked about including books. I had a conversation this morning that there are all these things that I want to like mull over from that conversation. Do you include just regular quotations in your
I
Commonplace?
am in Hannenberg's Commonplace book.
Would you guys like to hear some from
Oh
Graham?
my word.
Love some from Graham.
Okay.
Now,
it.
these are without context. Just bear that in mind,
Graham,
listener.
you're in here a ton.
I believe that 100%.
So this one is from this morning.
Okay.
True freedom is doing whatever you want whenever you want it.
See, I was being facetious.
Were you though? We don't know.
On learner interests. For one thing, I don't really care about learner interests.
That's a very
On
Graham quote.
teaching. Aw, crap. If I'm going to do this well, I need to love the students.
I did say that.
You did.
On espresso machines. Everything I love is expensive.
That's good.
In class. Googling. Googling. Meet local single metalheads. Oh, shouldn't have clicked on that.
Was that in rhetoric? Please tell me that.
Yeah, that was in rhetoric. Decaf is like a mother-in-law's kiss.
I don't like that at all.
Stop washing your hands, fool. That's what it says in Proverbs. That one I can't read.
Okay.
I kind of feel like there are people who are better than people. That was on the aristocracy.
How much do you appreciate this, Graham?
Yeah.
Also browsing in rhetoric. Katy Perry? Nope. Alan Greenspan. Now we're talking.
That's good.
Oh man.
Do you have any AJ quotes you want to read, Graham?
I don't have any. I don't.
Do you not include
no.
personal quotations?
I don't.
Okay, cool. So again,
Probably because AJ can do it right then and there with Evernote, whereas
Yours take
the
time,
limitation of my system is I'm sitting down with like cards at my desk.
Magby, would you like to hear one of yours?
no. Yeah,
Yes.
I do. Yeah, for sure.
This was you after a hard week. I have scotch at home. Life will be okay.
I don't remember saying that.
Oh,
I'm sure I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the only one you have?
Let me see. I think maybe.
Makes me nervous.
I've been working with Graham for a long
Yeah,
time.
seriously.
Oh, my word.
I'm okay with only one.
I Googled bees, and this is a not...
Googled? You
Is it
mean
about
just
bees?
It's from Dracula. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, sure.
Chasing an errant swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic when the fit of escaping is upon him. So,
What?
so I'll slower. Sorry,
Thanks,
I
sorry.
read fast sometimes. Chasing an errant swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic when the fit of escaping is upon him.
Sure. That's
So-
Yep. That's a great.
Way harder to
good,
get
yeah.
a naked loony when he's
Then-
trying to escape.
Yeah,
true.
I like that.
But you didn't say that.
No, I didn't. But I should have, I guess.
It's on bees.
I didn't think about this till you started doing that. This YouTube channel has since shut down. I think the name is Every Frame a Painting.
Yeah.
Every Frame a Painting.
yeah.
What they did is essentially this, where they would watch films and then split up the clips and then tag them with what is happening in this clip. Is this a certain type of shot? Is this a certain type of character? And then what they would do is they would look at, under each category, what do we have a ton of clips of? Do we have a ton of clips about heroes? Do we have a ton of clips about how people show like past time? Do we have lots of
like montages, that kind of thing?
yeah. Like, what do we have lots of? And then they would build their videos around that. So I'm just curious, is that a way that you all use this system also to look and say, I have an interest in this topic, or I want to write or speak or whatever on certain topics? Do you ever use the Commonplace that way?
Oh, I mean, I feel like if you definitely looked through my Commonplace books and the things that I wrote, you would get a sense as to what I valued,
Yep.
for sure. I think, you definitely, the longer you do it, you go back and you realize that you've had these trains of thoughts, or you've had these areas of inquiry that you maybe didn't even know you could put a category to it.
Right.
Like, I don't really know why I'm reading the Shelby Foote's History of the Civil War. It maybe is because I live in the South now. Maybe it's because I live in the United States now. Maybe is it because, you think about how crazy it was that this military engagement of, in the same country happened. I don't even know. So, but if you take all these notes and then as you sort of go back, maybe it is, I think, kind of helpful to sort of say, well, yeah, during 2017 to 2020, I really thought a lot about what it meant to be a citizen of a nation, especially a nation I wasn't born into. And so maybe there's a bit of an autobiography that comes with the topics that you're spending time contemplating, if that makes any sense.
I think that's the main benefit of doing a chronological Commonplace book. So it's harder to organize, it's harder to find things within it, but you see development, you see strands of thought that go through there. And there's something to being able to like hand on to your kid. Like this is, when I was your age, this is what I was reading or thinking about. I think there's something.
That's super nice. I still have my old paper Commonplace book. Yep. This is so much more convenient.
Yes. I like it a lot. And it's also, yours is way more portable, right? So
way more portable.
Graham actually had to think about bringing his shoebox. I actually forgot mine, even though I asked you all to bring yours. So, like there are problems.
And I can share, I could share a whole notebook worth of quotes with somebody. If it was like, hey, what did you like from this book? I can share the whole thing instantly.
If my house burns down and my Commonplace book goes, it's gone.
Yeah.
If the internet goes away, AJ's is gone. I don't know.
I guess Evernote
it's actually backed up,
Evernote
it's backed up to your computer. You have a copy of it on your PC.
Yeah, and you can actually save the entire thing in like a long text format, and I could just print it out if I wanted to.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I do think there is something to writing those words by hand that
it helps. It helps with memory for sure.
And there's I think it was Jack London who, when he wanted to become a writer, like when that was the career he went after, he would pull out Homer or whatever and just write long passages from Homer. Like he wanted an authorial voice, and so he just went back to the classics,
just to feel what it was like to write that sentence, or
to
whatever.
make that voice his own. This is catechism of so I'm saying words that are not my own, and then to do the commonplace is to write words that are not your own, so as to like fall under that, and to, I don't know, add your voice to the great conversation. Okay, I think this is good. John Locke had some really strong opinions. If you care to read A New Method of Making Commonplace Books, he goes through how to organize like a paper book that's like cover to cover. And he has an organizational system that seems helpful, but since none of us use it, I don't want to overstate that one.
Catherine, our other English teacher, has a Commonplace book as assignment in her English class, I believe.
Do you all know? Oh, I thought that was all the English classes.
No, we don't.
I just recommend it.
I also recommend it, but I don't have it as an assignment. That was something that an old English teacher at the school really championed. But I just never really figured out a way to really integrate it in a way that I felt was worthwhile and not just like hoop jumping for the students. I
do think a lot of our freshmen and sophomores keep one. They know it's coming. It's a thing they hear their older siblings talk about. Most
there is one that has been passed down from senior to senior throughout the years that has sort of maybe less than savory entries in it.
Sure. And I would say many of the student ones, when they talk about, I'm going to add that to my commonplace, it's a funny quote that they're adding. But there's something I like about that of they want to hold on to, like particular moments of wit or humor. I mean, that's what AJ just read of his Graham quotes.
One of my whole notebooks is friends and students quoted.
Yeah.
And it's just, I have novel, book, friends and students.
Yeah. But even in that's a way to tell stories about these people you've known.
Oh, I have a student who, when she received something back that was a good grade or whatnot, she made reference to her friend that she was going, under her breath, that she was going to put it in her flex binder.
Okay.
I said, what's a flex binder? And she says, it's a binder full of things that I can read if I need to remind myself. Like, I need to flex on myself. Like, I need to remind myself that I did something good. That was like, I guess that's kind of like a commonplace book. I thought it was an adorable thing that the student kept a flex binder.
I guess the common topic is I'm awesome.
Yeah,
but,
which is, yes, but hopefully it grows over time, that it's not just my fine achievements, but other things that one finds interesting.
Yeah. We don't need to belabor the point, but what is this? It's a way of collecting what you've been reading and thinking about. It's a way of holding on to important ideas that otherwise you will forget.
Oh, I would love to hear if listeners had their own versions and shared pictures of them or just had examples of things that they did. It's a fun habit to develop.
Yeah.
It is time consuming.
Yeah. And there are so many different ways to use this tool. So whereas the three of us we're very focused on the information contained in those notes. If you look up pictures of Commonplace Books, you see it's not only words, it's pictures and drawings and like to read a quote and then draw a picture that's kind of a response of how you think about that quote. Like there's an artistic side to it too.
My wife uses Pinterest in this way. She's a designer, and so she collects a huge repository of just visual references that she can go back to.
Yeah, and that's all. And just tying it back in with Marie Kondo, I don't think she's wrong. Graham, you said this already, that it takes time to do all of this, but in some way it it makes the act of am I going to say this the right way? It makes the act of reading more worthwhile. That instead of it just being the pleasant experience of reading through a book that you'll have the vague memory of years later, you're actually saying to yourself, this is what I want to hold on to. This is what I think matters from this book.
The little lie I tell myself when I'm working on it is that I'm a monk in a scriptorium and I'm writing down important things that are going to last for generations.
Yeah. But they will.
And I feel that way. I feel like a little scriptorium. I'm like, especially when I'm like, oh, my back's sore. I've been writing for like 40 minutes or whatever. But it's also good use to use my my fountain pen. I was going to say these idols of aristocracy or whatever.
Yeah,
there are some people who are just
better. Yeah.
I feel like there are just some people who are better than other people. I wasn't necessarily putting myself in that better category. I was just making a statement.
Just an observation.
It was just an observation.
Yeah.
Chris Pratt is in that category.
He's in that category. He's better than me.
He, I have nothing to say about Chris Pratt. The only time I use a fountain pen is to write down quotes. Is to do Commonplace. It's
a tactile and delightful experience.
It is a better experience, right? What?
Sorry, I'm looking through my friends and students, and I found another Donaldson quote.
What
you want to hear it?
Yeah, of course.
Ugh. Another year, another me not winning sexiest man alive.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, there we go. All right, so I think that's all I have to say. I have no idea how to bounce off of that one. Sorry. So
I gotta quit reading
every year. It comes and goes, and I'm overlooked.
One of my students last year said, "For the longest time, I thought George Clooney was president."
So good. That is wonderful. Wow. Any other wonderful quotes you want to end with, Graham? AJ?
I have no others. None that I can top.
Oh, man,
apparently,
so good.
My past self is more quotable than my present self.
No, you're doing a wonderful job. But I would implore this to listeners that anything, it's just a way of collecting things that have been important to you, and to make sure that they don't just pass off into forgetfulness.
Or you forget. Yeah, if you have an experience of a book and you're like, that book was amazing, and then you're not going to remember it in 3 years.
Right.
Not in the same way that you're remembering it now. This is a way to try to keep it.
Yeah. Well, think about it like the tattoos. Remember, they can either get baked in and sort of fade and blur over time, or you can apply sunscreen, keep them fresh, keep them sharp, get them retraced every now and again.
Yeah,
that's really what it's for. It's to turn back to, in that when you're creating new work or thinking new thoughts, you're building it off of previous thoughts, and so to actually hold on to those. There's
a soul crafting part of it as well. Sure. There is an expansion that is happening of your capacities, of your understanding. There's the humility that builds up where you realize like there's so much to learn, and you will never read all the books. Yeah. And I think that I have a not fully thought through, half baked sort of like spiritual discipline aspect to it as well that I don't really know how to frame yet, but I really do see it as like something that is a it's not like I'm doing this because I want to make myself better, but there's something about humanizing myself by doing this that feels right.
So again, the quote from the beginning was, to copy 10 quotations from a single book would take at least half an hour. Yeah. My argument in this episode is it's worth a half hour.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing that it takes a lot of time. I'm saying that it's worthwhile to do that.
The copying itself is worth it.
Yeah.
Even if you copied the thing onto a new piece of paper and then threw the piece of paper away, the copying itself would be worthwhile.
Yeah. To have spent, so if that's 3 minutes per quote, to spend 3 minutes thinking about those great ideas, if you're reading good books, is worthwhile. That's a good use of your time.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. That's the takeaway.
Cool.
So that's all I got.
Well, if you have awesome, interesting Commonplace books or ideas about Commonplace books, email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. If your Commonplace book is on Twitter, you can tweet at us at it better not be.
That'd be an interesting way to do it.
It's how you should see which tweets spark joy.
No, I was saying that you send out, instead of keeping the quotes to yourself, you share them all.
Oh, if you had an open Commonplace book, we just set up a bot that just tweeted out.
That's part of what Ryan Holiday will send out pictures of his note cards.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing he does.
If you can tweet us at Classical Stuff, CLSSCAL Stuff. You can see us at classicalstuff.net. And this has been our Commonplace conversation.
Yep.
I don't know how to end this.
Well done. Make sure to write down every word we've said.
Yes. Add some things we've said to your Commonplace book. That would be very delightful. But this is Graham, Thomas, and AJ signing off.
Signing off.
Ciao.